They called her the coffee girl, the one who labeled cables and cleaned server rooms, while real operators did the important work. But when a $20 million drone went dark over hostile territory, she was the only one who could save it. And when a cocky sergeant made the mistake of slapping her in front of everyone, 3 4-star generals appeared within minutes. Not to arrest her, to salute her. This is the story of the most dangerous person nobody saw coming. The control room existed in permanent midnight, deep beneath Creech Air Force Base, Nevada. Project Harpy operated in a world without windows, without daylight, without mercy. 47 screens glowed with cold blue light, casting shadows across faces that had forgotten how to smile. The air tasted like recycled oxygen and anxiety. It was 05 for 5 hours on a Tuesday morning. Most of the base was still wrapped in desert darkness. Personnel sleeping in their barracks, dreaming of anywhere but here. But Sergeant Olivia Reigns was already at her station. She had been there for 20 minutes, moving through the security protocols with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. CAC badge scan, biometric verification, retinal scanner. Each checkpoint passed without hesitation, without conversation. The armed guards barely looked at her anymore. She was part of the furniture, background noise in a facility where billion-dollar decisions happened every hour. Olivia preferred it that way. She moved through the control room like a shadow, her boots making no sound on the polished concrete floor. Her uniform was perfect, pressed to edges sharp enough to cut paper, not a thread out of place. Dark hair pulled back in a bun so tight it looked painful. Brown eyes that tracked everything but revealed nothing. Console 7, back corner. Flickering overhead light that gave most people migraines. She sat down and her fingers began to dance. System diagnostics, network integrity verification, encryption protocol checks, satellite uplink confirmation. Tasks that should take trained technicians an hour to complete. She finished in 11 minutes, and she did it every single morning. By the time the day shift arrived at 0730, her workstation gleamed, logs updated and color-coded, reports filed with mathematical precision, everything cross-referenced and documented with a level of detail that made 20-year veterans shake their heads in quiet disbelief. But nobody asked questions. To them, she was just another tech, quiet, competent, invisible, exactly what she needed them to believe. Staff Sergeant Merrick arrived at 0747, exactly 17 minutes late, carrying a protein shake in one hand and an ego the size of Nevada in the other. He was everything Olivia wasn't. 6'2" of swagger and volume, broad shoulders that filled doorways, a voice that could crack concrete. He moved through the control room like he owned it, slapping backs, cracking jokes, making sure everyone knew he was there. 2 years at Project Harpy had made him the unofficial king of the operations floor. He knew the systems, knew the protocols, knew how to talk to officers and make them laugh. He was good at his job, just not as good as he thought. Reigns. His voice boomed across the quiet hum of the control room, shattering the focused silence like a brick through glass. Coffee run, 2 creams, 1 sugar, and actually make it hot this time. I don't know what you did yesterday. That was lukewarm garbage. A few technicians glanced up from their monitors, then quickly looked away. They'd seen this before. They'd seen it every day for 2 weeks. Olivia didn't react. She simply stood, smoothed the front of her uniform, and walked toward the break room without a word. No acknowledgement, no resistance, just silent compliance. It had been like this since she arrived on temporary duty assignment. Since day 1, Merrick had decided she was beneath him. Maybe it was her size, barely clearing 5'4" in combat boots. Maybe it was her silence, the way she never joined the banter or laughed at his jokes. Maybe it was just that she was new, and he needed someone to establish dominance over. Whatever the reason, he'd made her his personal assistant. Fetch coffee, organize cable runs, label connectors in storage closets that hadn't been opened since the Bush administration, inventory equipment that nobody would ever use, tasks so far beneath her actual capabilities they bordered on criminal. But Olivia never complained. She did every task perfectly, every cable labeled with military precision, color-coded and documented, every inventory list accurate down to the last zip tie, every degrading, mindless assignment completed faster and better than anyone expected. And somehow, that made Merrick angrier, because perfect compliance without pushback made him look petty. It drew attention to what he was doing. Young Eamon started noticing her, watching how she formatted reports, how she organized her digital workspace with surgical efficiency. One junior analyst, fresh out of tech school, made the mistake of asking her a question during a morning briefing. "Sergeant Reigns, how do you structure your diagnostic logs?" Because I noticed your error detection rate is. Reigns doesn't do technical work. Merrick cut him off with a condescending smile. She does coffee runs and cable management. If you want to talk systems, talk to someone who actually operates them. Uncomfortable laughter rippled through the room. Forced, awkward. Olivia set the coffee on Merrick's desk, met his eyes for exactly 1 second, and returned to her station. But in that single second, something flickered in her gaze. Something cold, something calculating, something that looked like she was keeping a very detailed score. One of the older sergeants, a quiet man named Tors who'd been at Harpy since its inception, noticed. He watched Olivia return to her console, watched her fingers move across the keyboard with unconscious precision, and a thought crossed his mind. She moves like someone who built this system. He dismissed it immediately. That was ridiculous, wasn't it? It happened at 1,407 hours on an otherwise ordinary afternoon. The day shift was in full routine. A dozen technicians monitoring drone operations across 4 continents. MQ-9 Reapers conducting surveillance over 3 different time zones. Standard operations. Standard boredom. Then every alarm in the facility screamed at once. Red lights exploded across the main display like blood spattering a wall. Alert tones pierced the air with the urgency of a heart monitor flatlining. 12,000 feet over hostile territory. A $20 million autonomous aircraft had just gone completely blind. The control room erupted into chaos. Technicians lunged at their keyboards like they were drowning, and the keys were oxygen. Voices overlapped into meaningless noise, everyone shouting over everyone else. Monitors flashed cascading error codes faster than human eyes could track. Lock down the primary data link. Switch to backup navigation. Reboot the sensor array. Try the redundant guidance system. Nothing worked. Every command returned the same response. System unresponsive. The Reaper was drifting. 20 seconds from leaving controlled airspace. 40 seconds from entering civilian flight corridors. 60 seconds from potential compromise by hostile forces. Merrick stood in the center of the storm. His face flushed crimson, veins bulging in his neck like ropes. He grabbed a phone, barked orders at someone on the other end, then slammed it down hard enough to crack the housing. Someone tell me what the hell is happening. 35 seconds until airspace violation. We're locked out of the command protocols. Guidance system won't accept manual override. Sir, we're about to lose the bird entirely. Merrick's hands were shaking. He was good in routine situations, excellent at following protocols. But this was beyond him. This was catastrophic system failure, the kind that ended careers and made congressional hearings. 30 seconds. And then Olivia Reigns stood up. No announcement, no request for permission, no dramatic declaration. She simply walked across the control room floor, her small frame moving with absolute purpose, and sat down at the master control console, the one only senior officers were authorized to touch. Reigns, what the hell do you think you are? She didn't look at him. Her hands were already moving across the interface, fingers flying with the precision of a concert pianist, pulling up diagnostic screens that most of the room had never seen before. Root level access, core system architecture, command protocols buried 3 layers deep in the operating system. 25 seconds. Her eyes scanned lines of code scrolling past at inhuman speed. She wasn't reading them. She was absorbing them, processing them, understanding them at a level that should have been impossible. Tors watched from his station, and his earlier thought came roaring back. She built this. Oh my god. She built this entire system. 20 seconds. Olivia's fingers never stopped moving, isolating corrupted processes, bypassing failed subroutines, rewriting command pathways in real time, with the casual confidence of someone editing their own grocery list. 15 seconds. She found it. A recursive error buried deep in a sensor fusion driver. The result of a patch uploaded for days earlier by a contractor who'd never field tested the code. The kind of microscopic mistake that should take a team of engineers 8 hours to locate. She identified it in 37 seconds. 10 seconds until airspace violation. Her fingers hammered out a fix, bypassing the corrupted driver, rerouting sensor data through a backup pathway that technically wasn't supposed to exist but clearly did, and uploading the patch directly to the aircraft. 5 seconds. Every screen in the control room went black. Total system failure. Someone gasped. Another person swore. Merrick looked like he was about to have a stroke. Then, one by one, the screens blinked back to life. Amber status indicators. Then yellow. Then green. The Reaper leveled out at precisely 12,000 feet. Guidance required. Mission continuing as if nothing had happened. Absolute silence crashed over the control room like a tidal wave. 40 people stared at Olivia Reigns. She calmly typed a final command. logging the incident with clinical precision, then stood and walked back to Console 7. Her expression never changed. Her breathing never quickened. She sat down and resumed her work as if she'd just returned from a coffee break. But Merrick's face told an entirely different story. Humiliation burned across his features like acid. His hands clenched into fists. His jaw worked silently, grinding teeth hard enough to crack enamel. And underneath the rage, something else flickered. The first cold touch of genuine fear. For 30 seconds, nobody moved. The control room hung in suspended animation, everyone processing what they'd just witnessed. A catastrophic system failure, the kind that should have required emergency protocols and senior leadership. Fixed by a sergeant they'd all dismissed as the coffee girl. Then Merrick's voice shattered the silence like a hammer through ice. "Who the hell authorized you to touch that console?" Olivia didn't respond. She was already back at her station, fingers moving across her keyboard, documenting the incident with the same meticulous precision she brought to everything. "I'm talking to you, Sergeant." Merrick's voice climbed an octave, bouncing off the walls. "That is a restricted terminal. You just violated about 15 different security protocols." She held up one finger without looking at him. Wait, that single gesture, calm and utterly dismissive, was like gasoline on a fire. Something snapped inside Merrick. He crossed the room in 4 angry strides, boots hammering the floor like artillery fire. He invaded her space, towering over her, close enough that she could smell the stale coffee on his breath and see the vein pulsing in his temple. "You think you're special?" His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow felt louder than his shouting. "You think because you got lucky fixing one glitch that you can just..." His hand came up fast. The slap echoed through the control room like a gunshot in a cathedral. It wasn't brutal, wasn't meant to cause serious injury, but it was loud, deliberate, and violent. His palm connected with the side of her head hard enough to snap her face to the right. Her headset, the encrypted kind issued only to senior systems operators, flew from her head and clattered across the floor, sliding to a stop near Torres' boots. Time stopped. Nobody breathed. Nobody moved. Nobody could process what had just happened. Physical contact in a secure military facility wasn't just inappropriate. It wasn't just a violation of good order and discipline. It was unthinkable. A boundary so sacred that crossing it meant immediate and catastrophic consequences. Merrick had just detonated a bomb in the middle of his own career, and he didn't even know it yet. Olivia stood perfectly still. She didn't touch her face where a red mark was already blooming, didn't turn to confront Merrick, didn't speak. Instead, she looked up at the camera mounted in the upper corner of the room, the one with the small red light blinking steadily, the one that recorded everything in 4000 resolution with military-grade encryption, the one that transmitted directly to National Strategic Command. For 3 full seconds, she stared directly into that lens. Her face was perfectly calm, but her eyes held a message that anyone watching would understand immediately. "You saw that. Now do something about it." 600 miles away, deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, in a room that officially didn't exist, General Arnold Thorne watched his screen and felt his blood turn to ice water. He'd been monitoring the Harpy crisis in real time, watching with professional interest as the system failure unfolded. He'd sat forward in his chair when Olivia stood up, a tight smile crossing his face. "There she is. Show them." He'd watched her savor multi-million-dollar asset and potentially prevent an international incident with the casual ease of someone fixing a typo. And then he'd watched Staff Sergeant Merrick slap her across the head. For 5 seconds, General Thorne didn't move. Then he reached forward and flipped a switch beneath a glass cover. The switch was red. It had never been flipped before. Most people didn't even know it existed, but it existed for exactly this reason. General Thorne pressed Y, and Creech Air Force Base changed forever. The sirens that erupted weren't like fire alarms, weren't like security breaches or active shooter warnings. They were higher pitched, sharper, designed specifically to cut through concrete walls and human bone. A sound that triggered pure hindbrain panic across the entire base. Blast doors slammed shut with hydraulic finality. Aircraft hammers sealed like bank vaults. The main gate dropped a steel barrier that could stop a speeding truck. Every communication line went dead. Every screen in every building turned blood red. In the control room, frozen confusion gave way to creeping terror. Nobody knew what directive blackout meant, because it had never happened before. Then the main door exploded inward. Not damaged, not forced, just overridden with such authority that the electronic locks didn't even try to resist. 6 operators in matte black, tactical gear swept into the room with the fluid precision of water flowing downhill. Full combat kit, rifles at low ready, visors down, Not a word spoken. They moved directly toward Olivia and formed a defensive perimeter around her. Not to detain her, to protect her. Merrick took an involuntary step backward, his face draining of color. What? What is this? Nobody answered him, because nobody was looking at him anymore. They were all staring at the doorway, where three people now stood. The first was a woman, in her late 50s, with steel grey hair and eyes like frozen nitrogen. General Evelyn Ross, commander of Cyber Command. 2 wars, 3 congressional testimonies, and a reputation for destroying careers with a single email. The second was a man who moved like violence wrapped in a uniform. General Marcus Field, Special Operations Command. Quiet, lean, decorated in conflicts most civilians would never hear about. The kind of officer who'd killed people with his bare hands, and then filed the paperwork correctly. And in the center, General Arnold Thorne, 4 stars on each shoulder. National Strategic Command. The kind of authority that made colonels nervous and politicians deferential. No one called the room to attention. No salutes were exchanged. The weight of their presence did all the work. General Thorne walked slowly to the nearest workstation. He didn't look at Merrick. Didn't acknowledge anyone except the terrified airman sitting at the console. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. Conversational, almost. Somehow, that made it more terrifying. Pull up Sergeant Reigns' personnel file. Omega level clearance. Authorization Thorne Alpha 97. The airman's hands shook so badly he mistyped the code twice. On the 3rd attempt, it accepted. The screen filled with black bars. Redactions covering 90% of the document, like someone had gone after it with a marker and no restraint. But what remained visible detonated like a shaped charge. Reigns, Olivia Militer's rank. Sergeant. United States Air Force actual position. Chief Systems Architect. Project Harpy Security Clearance. TS or SCI Special Access Program Omic Education. Redacted. PhD Computer Science. Redacted Specialization. Autonomous Systems Architecture. AI-Driven Defense Networks Design Systems. Project Harpy Full Authority. Redacted. Redacted Commendations. Defense Distinguished Service Medal. Joint Service Achievement Medal. Presidential Unit Citation. Redacted Tier 5 Blackcurrant Assignment. Embedded Operational Assessment. Redacted. The room went silent for an entirely different reason now. She wasn't just part of Project Harpy. She was Project Harpy. Every line of code. Every protocol. Every security measure and fail-safe. The entire autonomous defense grid that allowed the United States to operate drones on 4 continents simultaneously. Designed by her. Built by her. Understood by her alone. The coffee girl, the one they'd send for cable labels and inventory reports, was a national strategic asset. Tors whispered something that might have been a prayer. Another technician just stared, mouth hanging open. Merrick looked like he'd been hit in the chest with a sledgehammer. General Thorne turned slowly, and when his gaze settled on Merrick, the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. You didn't just assault a fellow NCO, Staff Sergeant. His voice could have frozen liquid nitrogen. You put your hands on a national strategic asset. You physically struck the only human being on this planet who completely understands our most advanced autonomous defense architecture. The system that protects American lives across 12 time zones. Merrick's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Olivia's voice cut through the crushing silence, calm and clinical. System integrity remains intact, sir. Minimal physical impact. No operational disruption anticipated. I can continue mission functions. She said it the way someone might report a smudged screen. Factual, detached. And then something happened that nobody in that room would forget for the rest of their lives. General Arnold Thorne straightened to attention and saluted Sergeant Olivia Reigns. General Evelyn Ross followed. General Marcus Field did the same. 3 4-star generals. Combined 58 years of service. Authority over hundreds of thousands of personnel. Saluting a 3-striped sergeant. Not for her rank, for who she was, for what she could do, for what she built. Olivia returned the salute with textbook precision, her face still showing no emotion. When the generals dropped their hands, Thorne spoke again. Sergeant Reigns, you are relieved of all ancillary duties effective immediately. You will return to full operational authority. Over Project Harpy, your cover assignment is terminated. Understood, sir? Thorne finally turned to Merrick. Staff Sergeant Merrick, you are hereby placed under immediate arrest pending court-martial for assault on a superior officer. She's a sergeant, Merrick blurted. I'm a staff sergeant, I outrank. Her functional rank, Thorne said, in a voice that could cut diamonds, is classified at a level you will never have access to. But for your understanding, She carries operational authority equivalent to an O6 colonel in matters pertaining to Project Harpy. You just slapped a colonel, Staff Sergeant. How do you think this ends for you? Merrick's face went from white to grey. Two security personnel appeared at his sides. Remove him. Total communications blackout. No contact with anyone outside legal counsel. They escorted Merrick out. He didn't resist, didn't speak, just walked like a man headed to his own execution. Because, in a way, he was. By 0600 the next morning, Staff Sergeant Carl Merrick had ceased to exist. Not transferred, not reassigned, not demoted, erased. His security clearance revoked at every level. Access badges deactivated. Personnel files sealed behind. Classification barriers so thick that congressional oversight couldn't penetrate them. His name removed from operational rosters. Training records, even the base parking registry. His quarters were emptied overnight. His locker cleared. His desk stripped. Nobody saw him leave the base. Nobody was told where he went. The official record showed only administrative separation security. Violation details classified. His workstation sat empty. They called it Merrick's Gap, and it stayed empty for 3 weeks. Until finally, someone put a small plant there. A succulent that needed almost no care. A reminder that even in controlled environments, some things grew quietly while others just made noise and died. The story spread like wildfire through the base. In the dining facility, a new airman asked what happened to the guy who used to run the operations floor. A tech sergeant leaned in and said quietly, he forgot that the quietest person in the room might be the most dangerous. Don't ever make that mistake. In the maintenance hangars, crew chiefs told the story to fresh arrivals. In briefing rooms, officers chose their words more carefully around junior personnel. A shift occurred across Creech Air Force Base. Subtle, undeniable. People started listening to the quiet ones. Started noticing who actually did the work while others took credit. Started understanding that competence doesn't announce itself with volume. Senior NCOs began asking for input from analysts who rarely spoke in meetings. Junior officers stopped interrupting their enlisted specialists. Work quality improved. Mistakes decreased. And in the Project Harpy control room, Console 7 remained occupied by the same small, precise figure who arrived before dawn and left after dark. Sergeant Olivia Reigns never mentioned what happened, never sought recognition, never changed her routine, but everything around her changed. 3 months later, at precisely 03 to 7 hours, the world almost ended. The USS Theodore Roosevelt sat in contested waters of the South China Sea, engines idling, every sensor reactive and tracking. A foreign destroyer had crossed into exclusion zones, ignored warnings, refused communication, and then achieved full weapons lock on the American carrier. Fire control systems aligned. Anti-ship missiles armed and ready. Threat boards lit up red across the Pacific Command. In the White House Situation Room, coffee went cold in forgotten cups. The president sat in grim silence, staring at a map that showed 2 nuclear-armed nations on the absolute edge of war. 30 seconds until they're in firing position, someone reported. Rules of engagement authorize defensive response. Another voice added. Fingers moved toward authorization codes. The machinery of retaliation beginning its terrible sequence. 20 seconds. The Secretary of Defense looked at the President. Sir, we need a decision. 10 seconds. Then every system aboard the enemy destroyer went dark. Radar, weapons guidance, fire control, communications, navigation, even basic electrical systems. Not damaged, not destroyed. Just turned off. No electromagnetic pulse signature. No visible attack. No missile launch. No cyber intrusion that their systems could detect. Just instant, total, silent shutdown. The destroyer veered of course, powerless, drifting in the current like a dead whale. The weapons lock broke. The crisis evaporated. In the Situation Room, confused silence gave way to frantic analysis. What just happened? Did we launch a cyber attack? Negative. All our systems show no offensive operations. General Thorne's secure tablet vibrated once against the table. He picked it up. Read the message that appeared on the encrypted channel. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed her words. Thank you. The response came immediately. Just doing my job, sir. Thorne set down the tablet and looked at the confused faces around the Situation Room. Nobody asked what had just happened. Nobody questioned the source of their salvation. They just accepted that somehow, somewhere, someone had reached across thousands of miles of ocean and flipped a switch that shouldn't exist, and the world kept turning. 20 million people would wake up that morning to a world that hadn't burned. They would drink coffee and complain about traffic and argue about sports, and they would never know how close they'd come, or who had saved them. Somewhere in Nevada, in a room with no windows, Olivia Reigns removed her headset and allowed herself the smallest smile. Not pride, not satisfaction, just the quiet certainty that the work had been done correctly. By the following week, something began appearing across military installations worldwide. A photograph, simple, unadorned, printed on regular paper and tacked to bulletin boards. Olivia at her console, headset on, eyes focused on screens filled with code, completely absorbed in her work. The overhead light catching her profile, casting her face half in shadow. No caption at first. Then someone, nobody knew who, scribbled beneath it in black marker. The photo spread, from Creech to Ramstein Air Base in Germany, from Kadena in Japan to Air in Qatar, from Daigo Garcia to MacDill to the Pentagon itself. It appeared in server rooms and operations centers, in maintenance bays and flight line offices, in the ready rooms and briefing spaces where real work happened, away from cameras and ceremonies, places where the quiet professionals operated. New Emin saw it and asked questions. Old hands told the story. Not all of it. Never all of it. Much of what Olivia had done remained classified at levels they'd never access. But they told enough. Enough to understand that the most dangerous person in any room is often the one you don't notice. Enough to know that respect isn't demanded with volume. It's earned in silence, proven in crisis, and remembered long after the noise fades. Enough to learn that before you dismiss someone, before you mock them, before you underestimate them, you should consider that they might know more in their quiet competence than you'll learn in a lifetime of loud confidence. A new culture emerged in the spaces where that photo hung. People worked harder, spoke less, listened more. They stopped measuring worth by volume and started measuring it by results. They learned to value the technician who showed up early and stayed late. The analyst who rarely spoke in meetings but whose reports were always flawless. The specialist who didn't need recognition to do excellent work. Officers started asking their quietest team members for opinions. Senior NCOs began mentoring based on capability rather than charisma. And somewhere in all of it, the military got a little bit better. One installation at a time. One quiet professional at a time. Console 7 in the Project Harpy control room remains occupied by the same precise figure. Sergeant Olivia Reigns still arrives before dawn. Still runs diagnostics with mathematical perfection. Still works with a focus that seems to bend reality around her. But she doesn't fetch coffee anymore. She doesn't label cables or inventory storage closets. She does what she was always meant to do. She monitors the autonomous defense grid that spans the globe. She refines algorithms that protect American lives in ways most people will never comprehend. She solves problems that other experts don't know exist yet. And she does it quietly. No press releases. No award ceremonies. No medals pinned to her chest in front of cameras. The work is classified. The impact is immeasurable. The recognition is unnecessary. Because Olivia Reigns didn't join the Air Force for glory. She joined to serve, to protect, to build something greater than herself. And in doing that work with silent excellence, she became something no rank or decoration could capture. A legend whispered in the hallways where warriors are made. A standard impossible to meet but inspiring to pursue. A reminder that true strength doesn't need to announce itself. It just shows up, does the work, changes everything, and disappears back into the shadows. On her console, barely visible unless you know to look for it, is a small inscription she etched into the metal years ago. Just 3 words in tiny letters. Build, protect, serve. No glory, no recognition, just purpose. And for Olivia Reigns, that's more than enough. This is the story of silent warrior Olivia Reigns. The woman they underestimated. The genius they overlooked. The protector they never saw coming. The one who proved that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Silent Warriors for more untold stories of the heroes who operate in the shadows. The ones who change the world without ever asking for credit. Drop a comment and tell us about a time someone underestimated you. Or tell us about someone in your life who does incredible work quietly, without recognition. Because those are the people who deserve to be celebrated. Those are the real warriors. And their stories deserve to be told.